All right. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about Bar S Foods. For those of you unfamiliar with Bar S Foods, we will go through a quick introduction to kind of who they are and what they do, but to give it the simplest possible explanation, Bar S is a meat products and distribute meat products, sausages, hot dogs, other meat products like that. And they are obviously Cisco Meraki customer. So what we're going to talk about today is first and foremost the introduction, which is what we're doing now, a little bit of logistics. We'll get into Cisco Meraki as a technology, what that architecture looks like, a little bit about how the cloud management works, just so everyone's on the same page about kind of what the technology is that we're talking about today. From there, we'll dive into Bar S and their specific kind of use case, some quick introduction into what it is they do and what their network infrastructure and IT infrastructure looks like, and then kind of how they've used the Cisco Meraki technologies to evolve that architecture to accomplish the things they're trying to accomplish and generally just reduce a lot of the operational friction that they faced with kind of previous technologies. We'll do a demo. Brandon has been kind enough to let us demo the Bar S organization, so we'll actually be taking a look at their some of their equipment today. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the product families. So we won't look in depth at all the product lines that Meraki has today, certainly, but I want to give a quick overview toward the end of what it is that we offer. We'll talk about a few product lines in the context of Bar S's use case in the context of the demo, but just to give you a picture of the kind of ecosystem that those products sit in. And then we will hopefully have some time at the end for Q&A. These sessions where we have someone from a customer organization on the line, we usually get some great questions for me and some great questions for them. So, feel free when we get to that Q&A portion to ask me questions, ask Brandon questions, and I'll kind of play moderator at that point, lay those questions verbally so that he can answer them. And then you should also feel free to ask questions throughout the session. Please use the Q&A panel for asking any questions that you have, not the chat panel. It's much easier for us to monitor just the one Q&A kind of portion of the WebEx, and that way we make sure we get everybody's questions answered if possible. So as I mentioned, starting off with a couple quick logistical things. If you are an IT professional with a kind of end organization, if you're not a partner, reseller, consultant, but an actual technology consumer at the kind of end customer level, you may be eligible for a free access point for attending this webinar. That AP comes with a 3-year cloud management license, full-featured, everything that you would get if you purchased a Meraki AP and a 3-year license. So it's a pretty sweet deal. You don't have to do anything other than attend this webinar and then follow up with your Cisco Meraki rep in order to confirm your shipping information. So if you want to check on the eligibility details, make sure you meet the requirements, you can do that at meraki.cisco.com/freeap. And then you'll need to confirm your shipping address with a Meraki rep, which you can do by just emailing or calling them. If you don't know who your Meraki rep is, the webinar reminder email that you received prior to attending this webinar include that contact information. If it doesn't or you're unable to get a hold of that person, you can always do one of two things. You can reach out to your Cisco account team if you have an existing relationship with your Cisco team, the kind of Cisco generalist team, and ask them to get you connected with your Meraki specialist. Or you can go to meraki.cisco.com/contact and fill out a form that will get you connected to the right rep to help you out with any questions that you have and to get this AP confirmed for you and get that shipped out. So again, please make sure you reach out if you're interested in that. We will not be able to send it to you unless we confirm that we are sending it to the right place. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Cisco Meraki. And I don't want to spend too much time here, but I do want to give a quick kind of overview for anyone who's not as familiar with what it is that we do at Cisco Meraki. I want to make sure we have that kind of foundation before we dive into what specifically Bar S Foods is doing with this technology and these capabilities. So Cisco Meraki is a part of Cisco, obviously, and what we do is cloud-managed IT. And cloud-managed IT is not the end goal. Cloud-managed IT is sort of the vehicle. It's how we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish is to make IT management, monitoring, operations, et cetera, simpler for our customers. So you can see here up at the top, simplifying across IT with cloud management. That is the fundamental goal of Cisco Meraki. And the cloud management is what enables us to do that in a lot of cases. This spans 6 different product lines and arguably 7 different technology areas. So you have wireless access points, the MR line. You have MX security appliances, which are also SD-WAN capable. You have MS switches. You have the MC IP phones. You have Systems Manager, which is our software, all software EMM or MDM product. And then you have the MV camera, which we actually just released fairly recently and is taking off like crazy. That's an exciting new one for us. One minor typo in here, I forgot to update one of the numbers on the slide. We actually have over 150,000 unique customers, and there are over 2 million Meraki network devices, not including Systems Manager endpoints, out there in the wild. So we've seen this growing really aggressively, actually, both before and after we were acquired by Cisco, and it's been really exciting for us, and to us it means that we're doing something right? We're offering something the market needs, because otherwise people wouldn't be buying it, wouldn't be using it. So the other thing I want to talk about in terms of overall kind of cloud-managed IT architecture is how does this actually look functionally, right? How does this cloud management work? And I'm not going to go through all the components in this slide. There's a lot of information here that I'll just let you read through. But there are two things that I do want to highlight. One is the sort of overarching architecture of how this cloud management works. So when we say cloud managed, what we mean by that is you have Cisco Meraki, whether they're actually Cisco Meraki like vendor devices like access points, switches, security appliances, et cetera, or they're Systems Manager endpoints, right? A iPhone or Samsung tablet or something that you've installed the Systems Manager MDM agent on. Either way, those devices are communicating back to the Meraki cloud. And what they're doing is they're downloading configuration information, right? And they're uploading monitoring metadata. So it's that command and control traffic. So you have this model where we're not sending your user data to the cloud. So if you are a user on a Meraki network and you go to google.com, that traffic is not going to the cloud. It's purely the command and control or the management and monitoring traffic that goes between the cloud and the devices. And that's to allow you to configure and control those devices from the cloud, as well as to get analytics, get monitoring data, get traffic usage data, all those kinds of things, again, from the cloud that is being kind of monitored and observed by those devices. There's a question that comes up a lot when we talk about this, which is, okay, so if this is all cloud controlled and these devices are talking to the cloud, what happens when we lose cloud connectivity? And so I wanted to make sure to cover that up front. If you lose connectivity to the cloud, either because your internet is down, there's an ISP routing problem, whatever it might be, the devices continue to operate, and they continue to run on their last known good configuration. They'll also buffer or cache that monitoring metadata locally until they can reconnect to the cloud and backfill that. So you'll continue to, continue to serve clients, apply firewall rules, all that good stuff, all the configuration elements that are there, and also continue to gather that monitoring data. When you regain access to the cloud, then that monitoring data will be shipped up, backfilled in. So you don't have an ugly gray section of the graph that says, hey, we didn't have any data for this time period because we were offline. We'll still have that data as long as the device was on and monitoring the and passing the traffic, right? So with that, if you want to know more about our data center architecture, redundancy, reliability, compliance, any of that good stuff, meraki.cisco.com/trust is a great resource for that kind of material. So I want to dive into Bar S Foods, and at this point, I'm going to ask Brandon to kind of jump in and help me out here, because he's going to obviously be able to explain this much better than I can, and thankfully he was able to join us today. So first things first, Brandon, if you could take a minute to just talk to us a little bit about what is Bar S Foods, what do you guys do, and really what is your kind of place in the market?
Sure. So we are, as you said earlier, we are a packaged meat producer and distributor. Bar S Foods is owned by a larger company out of Monterrey, Mexico called Sigma Alimentos. Sigma is actually in the process of acquiring other units worldwide. They actually just made an acquisition roughly a year ago in Spain of a company called Campo Frio, who is a large distributor of packaged meats and cheeses in Europe. As far as how we operate here within Bar S Foods and Sigma US, we essentially, it's almost as if we run two separate business models in tandem. We have a large warehouse or bulk section of our business, which is going to be servicing places like Kroger, Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco, all of your big box stores. We do production for that. And then the other side of our business is we call it DSD, direct sales and distribution. And that services more of the Sigma side of the business, where it's going to be smaller mom and pop style grocery stores and restaurants that's going to be catering more to the Hispanic market. And those locations, though they have a smaller footprint, they have a whole lot of logistics that go into them as well versus our 5 production facilities and our large warehouse in Oklahoma.
Great. So can you kind of give us a little bit of context on what the IT infrastructure looks like? So, we've got some information here on the screen, but talk to us about, you've got these different parts of the organization. What does that mean from a network perspective in terms of how your architecture is structured, and then what kind of resources you have in-house for managing all those different components?
Sure. So I'm actually going to start out when we began our Meraki deployment. I think that's going to be the best way to really answer that. So we began this deployment roughly 18 months ago. The way we've been set up is that we have locations scattered throughout the U.S., roughly 21 locations. Those all connected back to a central data center via MPLS being provided by CenturyLink. Then each location just had its own internet connection. The existing infrastructure there is made up of Cisco Catalyst switches, 3500 and 2900 series switches. And we began, and that kind of gave us some problems because then we have quite a few resources that are also located within our parent company in Mexico that especially our DSD business had to call back to. So we have 2 different data centers serving out different applications and everything trying to connect back via MPLS. One of the problems that we were running into initially with our old deployment before we started using Meraki was if we lost MPLS, a location was essentially unable to do business. And people were having to stay late to catch up once MPLS came up, or we were having to, deploy client-based VPNs, and people were VPNing back to Mexico to be able to use SAP or other things that they had to use for accounting or batch processing, things of that nature. So we had quite a few problems within our infrastructure, and the other thing that we were facing was after BAR-S was acquired by Sigma, we've experienced a very significant amount of growth, not only in the market, but also in the tools that we use and in our staff and in location. So we began our deployment with Meraki with the access points. Originally, that was kind of the easiest way for us to test the waters, so to speak, with Meraki. So we got those rolled out. It was actually a pretty easy and fast deployment. It was, just a matter of you plug it in, it registers to the cloud, you throw a configuration template on it, and then you go hang it up wherever it's going to be. And that's all there was to it. So we rolled those out pretty quickly. From there, we use our DSD locations, or our smaller locations, as our test beds. We've now rolled out Meraki switches and Meraki security appliances in all of those locations. And they're functioning wonderfully. They're taking care of so many of our issues. If we have an MPLS outage, we fell right over to the site-to-site VPN. We maybe are down seconds, minutes at the most, depending on if we have to do manual routing changes. And then it's just business as usual.
Great. So you mentioned, and just for everyone who's there on the line, we will take a look at some of those VPN capabilities that Brandon just mentioned when we get into the demo as well. So you mentioned that, you had some challenges around MPLS and just, reliability and failover. You mentioned that, you had some issues around just growth and expansion. Talk to us a little bit about, what was the business impact of that? So you said people staying late and that sort of thing. What does that actually mean? Because obviously, every minute that you're down in an organization like that, that's dollars that you're losing.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that if you could.
So, yeah, so normal business hours generally 8 to 5, but let's say that we have, for one of our DSD locations, you have drivers out in the field. They are bringing in orders from customers. They're bringing in payments, things of that nature, but MPLS is down in that location. Well, you still have your accounting practices that have to take place every day. You have to close out the day. You have to settle. You have to charge credit cards, make deposits, things of that nature. So what we were seeing was we had hourly employees that are having to stay late, then paying overtime. We also have the human element of just people being frustrated by the fact that here it is, it's 5 o'clock, but now they're having to stay until 6 or 7 o'clock. They're not able to go home and see their families, things of that nature, because of an MPLS outage, because, you know, somebody with a backhoe 5 miles away went through a piece of fiber. You know, but that was causing a significant effect on people. And then additionally, where we have our production facilities, the way that we're structured is we have an application that we use to manage every single part of our process. This includes when we receive materials, and as we're running a batch through our process, for example, to make Franks, as we're running a batch of Franks through our process, we have to log that. We cannot move from process A to step A from step B in that process until it has been logged. So the other thing that we were facing was in our production facilities, when they would lose MPLS, we would have to essentially shut down production. And when you shut down production, people that have a C at the beginning of their title are looking at you, and you don't want that attention because we are losing money. The figure on, you know, what we lose per minute varies depending on the time of year, but what we lose per minute can very quickly add up to more than your salary. So what the Meraki has done for us is help us say, okay, well, we just lost fiber, fail over. We do have to do some static routing changes, and that's just based upon the way we're currently set up, and we're working on moving away from the static routing. But this is taking events that could be 4, 10, 18-plus hour outages and taking us from measuring them in hours to measuring them in minutes. And if we lose 5 minutes of MPLS connectivity, that's not holding up the line. It's when we were losing 4 or 5 hours of MPLS connectivity, that was holding up the line. That was getting us to the point where we may have to look at discarding product that could have gone to store shelves.
That makes a lot
Hope
of
that
sense.
answered the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So now let's transition. So you've talked a little bit about, you know, okay, what was life like before the Meraki solution? You talked a little bit about implementing, how you started with the APs, and then moved into some switches and security appliances. Talk to us about, you know, kind of the details of what is it, what are the features or capabilities or even work, you know, that you're now leveraging with the Cisco Meraki solution that are helping to solve these problems?
So one of the things that I really like about it is that it's a single pane of glass. So everything that happens, I can go to one place, I can see exactly what's happening, I can watch traffic as it moves from an AP into a switch, from my switch to a security appliance, and then from there how it's filtered. And I'm able to determine what's happening with that information. And that also makes my life a little bit easier, because if a user is complaining, I'm then able to pinpoint, okay, where is their issue? One of the other great things I like is just the visibility into traffic. We run very lean. It's myself and another network administrator that manages this network. I focus mostly on the corporate office, our data center, and our production facilities, and he focuses more on our DSD business. But we're both able to see exactly what's going on with our network. You know, if somebody says, hey, our internet's running slow, we can go and we can look and say, oh, well, that's because this person in the office next to you has been sitting and watching YouTube for the past 5 hours. So, you know, we're able to get that, or we're also able to say, okay, well, this person next to you is downloading a massive file from a file server in this location, and that's what's choking everything up. So there is that level of visibility too, and then there are just other kind of cool things that you'll run into that you can do with these that you didn't really realize you can do. And I'm actually going to tell a story here. Roughly about 6 to 8 months ago, the assistant to our president and CEO lost her cell phone. She lost it somewhere in our office, had no idea where it was, and she was absolutely freaking out because she was expecting an extremely important call from our CEO while he was traveling. Using the Meraki dashboard, I was able to find her cell phone. I was actually able to go to the point where I was like, oh, your cell phone's right here. That's where a closet is. Were you in that closet earlier? And turns out she was in there grabbing something out of this closet, put her cell phone up on a shelf, and walked out without it. So we're also able to pinpoint where specific devices are, not just in the event that somebody loses them, but let's say have a computer that's just blasting the network with broadcast. You can say, okay, this computer is blasting the network, and where is it? It's over here. Let's go find it. Let's grab that computer and see what's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want to really kind of touch on that, because I think it's something that we hear from a lot of customers, and it's something that resonates really strong with me because I used to, in a previous life, be a network engineer. And so all the configuration and the features are valuable, but to me, the thing that I hear the most consistently from pretty much everyone I talk to about the Meraki solutions is that visibility component, is the amount of stuff that you didn't know about what's happening in your network, who's on your network, what are they doing, how much bandwidth are they using, and for what, right? All of those things I think are hugely valuable. And I know when I used to manage a global corporate network back in the day, if I wanted to answer some of those questions, I had to either set up, NetFlow export to another solution, which means another interface and another, vendor to deal with and all that. I also had to potentially go and plug in a Fluke device or something to figure out what's going on, span a port, do all these things. And so being able to take that out of the IT kind of process and not have to deal with it anymore, I think is one of the most valuable things that the Meraki solutions offer. It's something I always like to highlight because it's something you don't really think about as much because it's not part of the mentality of, oh, what can these different vendor solutions offer me, until you use Meraki and you realize, wow, there's all this stuff that I didn't know that can just be incredibly useful in finding problems proactively, solving problems, all these kinds of things. So we talked a little bit about impact in terms of, downtime, both people impact as well as financial impact. I wanted to, because we're going to talk a little bit now about cost of ownership and sort of cost savings, I wanted to put a little bit of structure around that and explain some of the math and logic. And this is stuff that, Brandon, obviously you shared with us, and then we took that and did some math with. But just so that everyone on the call can kind of understand where we're coming from here, you can see on the left the sort of structure of the architecture. You've got 14 distribution centers, 5 production facilities, 1 warehouse, and then headquarters. And there are a lot of costs here that are not necessarily costs you might normally consider. There are things like MPLS downtime. There are things like firmware downtime when you do an update and something goes wrong, or even you do an update and something goes right, and you have to schedule all the maintenance and have people working in the middle of the night and all these things. So we actually worked with Brandon to go through and figure out, how much time was his team, and I'm using the word team maybe a little generously here because, as he said, it's basically him and one other person, were spending on all these tasks, not to mention how much you were losing on potential downtime and all this sort of stuff. And what we came up with was a cumulative number over a 5-year period of 525 hours over 5 years less that is being kind of discarded. You're losing 525 less hours of production, which is a huge, huge benefit. And because there's about a $10,000 hour production output for each site in the production facilities, that equates to about $5.25 million saved in terms of production revenue that you're not losing. And you can see there what the original number with the previous installation and then the Meraki number is in terms of unplanned firmware update downtime, planned firmware update downtime and unplanned outage downtime. So when we take those numbers and we look at them in the context of, you know, what that means for the business, there are three really, really cool numbers that I want to share here. And I'm actually going to go in reverse. I'm going to go bottom to top because I think it's a cleaner story for me mentally if I think of it that way. You have an overall 99% reduction. I know it's a crazy sounding number, but we've actually got the numbers down at the bottom to support that. If you look at that asterisk down in the bottom right in gray, 99% reduction in maintenance costs compared to the previous solution. So it was about 2.3 million with cable testing, packet capture, you know, general troubleshooting steps, as well as firmware update, downtime, things like that, coming back to under $9,000 with Meraki. It almost completely eliminates those maintenance costs and operating costs. And that's obviously that's huge, right? And when you factor that into the broader context of hardware, licensing, everything else that's not just operating costs, but actual, you know, CapEx as well, and you look at the whole picture, it's still a very, very compelling number. It's 85% reduction in total cost of ownership of this solution over 5 years. And because of that reduction, you end up basically in the black 119 days from start, where you've recouped the investment of whatever money was spent on the hardware, the licensing, the installation itself of having to refresh this equipment and go out there and deploy it. After 119 days, you've actually broken even with that investment. You've saved enough operationally to kind of zero out that money spent, and everything from there on out is just benefit. So I think this is one of the best examples that I've seen in over 4 years at Cisco Meraki of, you know, real-world savings and real-world benefit from a bottom-line perspective. And to Brandon's point earlier about the people with C in front of their title, right, that's what they like to see. That's the kind of thing that gets you on their radar in a good way. And as an IT guy, there are very few opportunities in my experience to kind of be in the vision or kind of in the sights of a C-level executive in a positive way. So it's always good to have those opportunities. So Brandon, let's talk a little bit about kind of what you're looking at going forward. So today you're doing, you know, wireless, you're doing switching, you're doing some security, and you mentioned some VPN as well. What's next? What are some of the things you're thinking about in terms of either the products, looking at, you know, expanding what you're doing with those, or potentially other Meraki products you're looking at investing in?
So, well, right now we're finishing out our security appliance deployment to our production locations. From there, we're going to take advantage of the site-to-site IPsec tunnels. We're actually going to run a hybrid deployment. So we're going to have all of our latency-sensitive traffic taking our MPLS path, you know, just due to the fact that we have that guaranteed SLA on it, where we have all of our TCP traffic going over IPsec tunnels and allow those two to fail between each other. That's immediate future. And we're beginning to test out the Z1 teleworker gateways. And so we have quite a few sales reps that work from home throughout the country. And right now what those guys have to do is they have their laptop and they just get on a VPN connection back to either one of our production facilities or our data center, and that is how they work, over a VPN connection directly from their computer. So they don't have a desk phone. If somebody wants to call them, they have to dial that person's cell phone number, so they're not on our local phone system where it's just extension-based 5-digit dialing. So what we're looking at, we're beginning to test out, is deploying these Z1 teleworker gateways and essentially giving these users the ability to have a home office that's completely connected back to the corporate office with a phone, with their computer. They're able to dock and connect via Ethernet with the SSID that's going to broadcast. It's also on the VPN tunnel back to our corporate office. So that way they function as if they are sitting at a desk, not just out traveling with their laptop and, okay, well, hold on, let me get on the VPN. They just go, they plug in, they do what they got to do, and they're off to the races. So that's the next thing that we are testing out. We're also doing a test in one of our production facilities of the MV security cameras. And I'm not going to lie, man, those things are pretty cool.
I tend to agree. So I would love to actually hear, kind of take a slight detour here. I'd love to hear, what is it about the cameras that that's interesting you, or that you're finding kind of different from other solutions you've looked at?
So what we're seeing is in the plant that we are testing these in, they're still on legacy switching. So they are on older switches, and there are some bandwidth bottlenecks within that switch environment. So what we're seeing is they have a little over 50 IP cameras deployed, and each one of those is streaming back to an NVR. And that's causing just, at minimum, a 14 to 18% utilization on my trunks going back to my core switch. So that's already just setting a really large baseline for just what the traffic should be going back across these gigabit trunks to my core. So what I like about these MV cameras is that they don't stream back to an NVR. They have, I think it was 128 gig SSD built into them, so they store all their video locally, and the only time they're streaming is either if they are offloading video or if somebody is viewing that specific camera. So though this location is on older legacy switches, this significantly reduces the amount of bandwidth and the utilization within that network, so that way they have more of their pipe, for lack of a better term, open for, phone calls, for file transfers, for production needs, things of that nature.
Makes sense. All right, so with that, we're actually going to leave the world of PowerPoint, and we're going to take a look at a quick demo. So let me jump back in. For security reasons, I got logged out, but let me get this reopened here. So this here is actually the Foods organization. So we can see here, I started out in what's called the organization overview page, and I'm going to take us through a couple quick things, and then I'm kind of going to look to you, Brendan, for guidance on what you think we should show off. But there are a couple quick things I'll highlight that are more generic, Meraki things that aren't specific to the BAR S deployment. One of them is this organization overview page. I think this is a really good starting point because it's really the view of what does my whole architecture look like. And if we zoom out here, we can actually see this globally. In the case of BAR S, their locations that are being managed in this are in the United States, so we can keep to that kind of scope there. But we can see each of these green or yellow markers is not necessarily a given site, production center or whatever it is. It's just an area. And what we'll do is as we zoom out and zoom in, those will get more and less kind of specific. So we can see here there's, 2 sites that are under this umbrella here. If I click on that, it's going to span that out and show me, okay, these are the 2 sites, and I can dive into one. There's also this table here on the side that I can hide or show that gives me some more detailed data about, what are the different sites, how much bandwidth am I seeing, is anything going on with them? Is it green or yellow? And we'll actually take a look at one of those yellow ones in just a second. We can see how many devices, right? We can see how many clients, what type of Meraki devices are in there, what the health of the network is. So this is kind of, as you would guess from the name, the overview, right? This is to give you an idea of what is the health of my complete deployment or complete architecture. Now, the beauty of the Cisco Meraki model, this cloud-managed IT model, as Brandon mentioned earlier, is to not to overuse the term, because I know we in the industry say this a lot, but it's a single pane of glass. And what we mean in this context by single pane of glass is from this one place, you can now go in and take a look at your wireless, your switching, your security, your cameras, any of these things, and you can look at them from the perspective of, is the device healthy? Or you can get into much more detail about really the user layer. In terms of device health, this El Paso DSD location we can see here has about 184 gigs of traffic in the last, I believe that's in the last week. Yes, over the last week. And we can see that it's yellow. So what I'm actually going to do is going to click into that real quick and just go to what's called the topology page. And the topology page actually shows me, as you might guess, a topology for that site. And this is actually live generated. This is not something that you have to upload. We determine this using LDP and CDP neighbor discovery data. So we can see here that we've got some access points, some switches, and the security appliance. And we saw that there was a yellow kind of icon for this network, that means something's alerting. And here we can actually see, oh, it's the MX. And we can dive into the MX security appliance and see, oh, it's because it's currently running on a cellular uplink rather than its wired internet port, right? And that may or may not necessarily be an issue. It may be something that's by design, but it's something you might want to know, right? And we can see here cellular is active. Here's the particular modem we're using. So every MX supports USB modems. There's a set of USB modems and providers supported. This one just happens to be running on cellular. That may be by design. It may be because of a failover, but there you go, right? Now, if we go back to the topology that we were just looking at, we can instead jump into an access point and do the same kind of thing. What's the health of this access point? Everything's green, so it looks good. It looks like there might have been some kind of issue back here. There was some kind of gateway issue for a little bit about a day ago. But we can see, okay, who are the clients associated with this, right? What SSID are they on? How much bandwidth? What are some of the health details about this device? And then we can actually go in and do some troubleshooting if we want to. We can say, okay, here is what the RF environment and the client environment looked like for the last day or in real time or for the last month or whatever it is, and say, okay, there was a complaint of an issue at, I don't know why we'd have people on the network at 2:30 a.m., but this is about 2:48 a.m. Okay, we can see, are there any RF events? What's the usage? How many clients are connected? So we can get that really clear picture of what might have been causing any issues that are reported, right? So again, that proactive and reactive approach. The other thing we can do here, because this is, I think, very relevant to some of the cost savings that we talked about earlier, is we can go in and take packet capture. And this is one of my favorite troubleshooting features. You have a whole suite of remote troubleshooting features that are built kind of into Dashboard that are a little bit less traditional, I guess you could say. They're things that we've built specifically for Dashboard. But at the end of the day, there are times that you just need a packet capture, right? A good old-fashioned packet capture to go in and pull out Wireshark and dust off your Wireshark skills and figure out what the heck is going on. And the ability to do that from this cloud interface is, I think, one of the most important things that helps to enable remote troubleshooting and remote management. Because if you have to send someone on site anytime you want to take a packet capture, then that's going to drastically increase the cost of troubleshooting issues at that site. And we can go in and do a packet capture on the MX, on the access points, or on the switches. If we want to do the switch, we just say, okay, we're going to do it on this switch on ports 1, 10, and 15, something like that. And we can either output that right here to this window or to a PCAP file that we can go and dissect in Wireshark. So those are just a few quick things I wanted to highlight. The other thing that I want to show before I let Brandon guide me around a little bit is actually the site-to-site VPN implementation. So if you look at this site-to-site VPN page, this particular site does not have site-to-site VPN on. And let me show you what that flow would look like if I was going to turn it on. Now, I obviously can't actually turn it on because I'm in demo mode, so it's not going to let me save anything, but I can show you what the flow would look like. So if you say, I want to turn on site-to-site VPN, let's say you have a smaller architecture where you just want to connect all of your sites together. In that case, you would do hub VPN, or mesh VPN, I should say. But if this is, say, one of many branches that are going to connect back to a data center, you might use Spoke. And if you're going to do Spoke, you're going to say, okay, this goes back to my Phoenix data center. And maybe I want to route all my internet traffic through the Phoenix data center. Maybe I don't. It's as easy as checking and unchecking that default route checkbox. Which of my subnets do I want to include as interesting subnets in this VPN? Just do that right here. And I click Save. That is the entire site-to-site VPN, IPsec VPN setup. This is one of the coolest features, I think, in the entire Meraki portfolio because it removes so many steps, not only to configuring an IPsec VPN, right, creating crypto maps, creating NAT exemptions, ACLs, all that stuff, but it also removes a bunch of the troubleshooting because there's less human error possible here. So if you are setting up an IPsec VPN, this removes the 20 minutes that you have to spend if anything goes wrong, digging through syslog messages, trying to figure out what didn't establish or what's preventing the tunnel from working bidirectionally or whatever the heck it is, because there's always something. This removes all of that. It's also resilient. So once these tunnels are up, basically what it's going to do when I click Save here, if I were to save this page, it's going to not only configure this El Paso site, it's also going to provide the necessary configuration to the Phoenix Data Center MX. Do both sides of that configuration. If I'm doing this in mesh mode, it's going to update all of the peers. And it's going to send them whatever config is needed to set up those tunnels. Once it does that, if anything changes, it's going to adjust. So if the IP address of this device changes because it moves off cellular and onto a wired connection, or it gets a new DHCP IP address, right, at a smaller site or a teleworker location where you might not have a static IP, it's going to inform Dashboard, hey, my IP has changed, here's my new contact info, and Dashboard's going to inform all the peers, and they'll just rebuild that tunnel. So that resiliency is really, really important in architectures where you don't necessarily have control over every medium or control over your IP scheme in something like a teleworker environment. All right, so with that, Brandon, I'd love any suggestions you have of things, whether it's particular networks, particular features that you think would be cool to show here.
Well, I mean, right now you're already talking about one of my favorite things, which is the site-to-site VPN, because that saves me from having a lot of those 3 a.m. phone calls that, IT guys absolutely love to have. Another thing, actually, that I really like is a feature that's in beta, and I'm trying to remember what the feature is called. Let me actually look in my dashboard that I have open here, and I'll tell you exactly what the feature is called. I know how to get to it. Just can't remember what it's called.
Hosted logs feature?
Yes, thank you.
I know you guys are using that, yep.
Yes. That's something that I really like. I have turned on several of my appliances, and that has actually helped me out with finding quite a few different anomalies and traffic patterns, and even quite a few people that are doing things in the middle of the night that they really should not be doing. And I will let everyone else connect the dots on that. So this is another thing that I absolutely love, and the beautiful thing with it is if we do have an issue or there's something going on, we can go in here and see exactly what happened, when it happened, and who it happened to. So this right here is just I think is one of the coolest things about the Meraki security appliances.
Yeah, and this is something that, as Brandon mentioned, and as you can see here on the page, it's in beta. It's something we're really excited about, and it's sort of the next step in Meraki kind of analytics, right? So we've always had traffic analytics on all the Meraki products, really, all the networking products, I should say, that show you, who's on the network, how much bandwidth they're using, what types of applications are they using. This is a whole other level of detail for that. So instead of just showing you that kind of aggregate data, we can actually show you data that previously you needed to export through syslog in order to get access to right here in Dashboard. So if you want to go in and see, okay, who has been hitting a particular bitdefender.net, since I see there's some stuff there. Oh, did I do that wrong? Let me try that. There we go. So anyone who accessed the domain bit.net, right? Here are the clients. Here are the remote hosts that are serving that particular domain, and here's where they are in the world. And you can actually see this on the map on the right. Here are the actual events of people hitting it, the HTTP gets to bitdefender.net, right? You can dive in more specifically in time as well. So if I want to, I can either do it up here in this time bar, or I can say, okay, there are a bunch of events at 9 a.m. Let's click on that, and it's going to expand that out. This is actually built in the same exact framework as our Security Center page. And we do that for a couple reasons. One is consistency in terms of user experience. Two is it's easier for us to build and maintain if we keep a consistent framework, right? So if you are an MX customer today and you're thinking, this looks an awful lot like the page that shows me my malware and IPS events, that's because we've used the same kind of model, same framework for that. And I'm really excited about this. We're going to continue to iterate on this. It'll be coming to GA relatively soon as something that, especially I think for education organizations who really need, from a compliance and legal perspective, to be able to identify, what is every site a particular student went to, or who are all the students who went to a particular site. I think that's going to be a really important feature for them. But as Brandon mentioned, it's also very useful if you're trying to track down, user behavior that is suboptimal or something that shouldn't be happening. If you're trying to track down a problem, if you're trying to track down a point of ingress for something that got onto the network that maybe shouldn't have, this is a really powerful tool for that.
And one other feature, too, I want to touch on that I think is really cool is the Layer 7 firewall and the traffic filter and traffic shaping. And the thing I really like about that is, as you can see, I do a lot of geo-blocking. But in my corporate office, we actually had a problem with people and Netflix. And just to avoid having to go through some of the scenarios of specifically saying, okay, we have to block traffic to Netflix, I was able to go into traffic shape and say, okay, all traffic going to and from Netflix, if you want to update your account or anything like that, that's fine. But we're going to throttle it down to, I believe we did 50 kilobits per second. So this way, you're not streaming video. You can get to it, but you're not going to stream it. So that's something that I thought was pretty cool. Actually, it looks like 358 kilobits per second. But once again, it shuts down the streaming, but still allowing access if somebody needs to update their account or something like that while they're, between tasks at their desk. Same with all of our peer-to-peer traffic. Instead of blocking it, because I'm kind of a sadist, I'll just throttle it down to the point where it's almost unusable. So, this is another thing that I catch myself in a lot and has really helped me out on trying to manage my network and maintain control and give priority to business traffic versus traffic that has absolutely no business relation whatsoever.
And actually, I want to highlight, so there's something you touched on there that actually I consider to be sort of a best practice. For anyone out there who, is trying to do something like that, where you're trying to control for peer-to-peer or streaming traffic, there actually have been a lot of I've had a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I know there have been some not studies per se, but IT surveys and things that have shown if you want to prevent people from accessing things like that, it actually in many cases is more effective to limit it to a really, really small number than it is to block it. And the reason for that is that there's something like psychologically about seeing, hey, you're not allowed to do this, that makes people look for ways around it. And whether those people are students or users or patients or whatever, or whatever your particular user base is, if they see a thing that says, hey, you can't do this, or you're not, you do not have permission to access this content or whatever it is, they're going to immediately start looking for workarounds. And, at the end of the day, if they try hard enough, eventually they're going to find something, right? Any system, there's some way around it if you really want to spend enough time and energy and maybe money on it. So what you can do is by doing this limiting approach instead, if it's just really slow, people tend to just blame the network and go, oh, well, there's something going on, and they just move on with their lives. It's a really interesting phenomenon. But I thought it was interesting that you've kind of approach here, as you put it, more from a sadistic perspective, but it actually can be very, very effective in preventing people from really spending as much time on trying to get around your filtering systems. So with that, I'm actually going to jump back into slides for just a couple quick minutes. Just got 2 more slides for you, and then we're going to take some questions. So as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, this all lives in this kind of ecosystem of Cisco Meraki Cloud Managed products. And what we refer to that whole setup as is the full stack. And you'll hear us talk about the full stack in 2 ways. There's what's called the full network stack, which is really MR, MX, MS, and sometimes Systems Manager, the mobility management client. And then there's the full stack, if you will, that also includes MC Communications and MV cameras. So these are the 6 product lines today from Cisco Meraki. And a couple things that are worth mentioning here. One is these are all managed in that same dashboard. If you have all 6 of these products, you manage them all in that one interface, regardless of how many sites. And that's a really, really powerful thing. And think about, for a second, how bizarre the idea is from a traditional IT management perspective to think I can manage my wireless access points, switches, phones, cameras, and say, user laptops in one interface. That's very, very unusual. Actually, we're the only vendor that does it. And it's something that I think we're seeing a ton of value from, because especially in lean IT environments like Bar-S Foods, where you have a large deployment, but you have a small team managing it, or in more of kind of the mid-market organizations that we see that have either smaller deployments or highly distributed deployments, anytime where you have a small IT staff relative to the size of your user base or the size of your network or the geography or whatever it is, having that consolidation is really, really valuable. The other thing I want to mention here is we keep adding to this. So if you go back a year and a half or so, there were 4 products. Those last 2, MC and MV, were all added in the last 2 years, I think in the last year and a half. MV was added in the last year. So we're going to continue to iterate on this and add new products, new capabilities to this portfolio, which means that single pane of glass, that dashboard that we have, the value of that just keeps increasing as we bring more things into the fold of that cloud-managed IT portfolio. There are webinars for all those different products. So if you're curious about any of those in particular, you can always attend a webinar for Introduction to Meraki Security, SD-WAN, switching, cameras, phones, etc. So before we take some questions, I want to give you an idea of where to go from here. If you are interested and want to learn more, which I hope you all are and all do, you can go to meraki.cisco.com/eval to start an evaluation of any of our products. So if you want to try any of the Cisco Meraki products, you can do that. If you want to learn more about what's new with Meraki, whether it's new with us as a business unit, new with us from a feature or product perspective, meraki.cisco.com/blog. Our blog has tons of information about what's new, what's going on, what's kind of fresh with Meraki. And finally, your best resource for all things Cisco Meraki is going to be your rep. So meraki.cisco.com/contact is a form that will help you get in touch with the right rep to help you out with any questions or issues. You can also, as I said earlier, take a look at the webinar reminder email that you got before this webinar. That'll have contact info for your rep as well. Or you can reach out to your Cisco generalist account manager or account team and ask to get connected with a Meraki specialist, and they'll connect you with the Meraki, they're called PSSs or ISRs, depending on the territory, to actually help you out with that. Now let's take a look at some of the questions that we got. So let me expand this out a little bit if I can. There we go, so I can see more. Looks like we've got quite a few questions, so give me just a moment to read through some of these, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Looks like I forgot to mention earlier, normally I give a quick shout out. We do have Deanna here as well from our marketing team who's been answering questions throughout the session, so thank you, Deanna. It looks like she's already gotten to quite a few of these, but let me see what we've got left to highlight. So Trey was asking, can we provide a list of cellular modems and providers that are fully supported? So if you go to documentation.meraki.com, and you search for 4G, this is the easiest way to get to it. You'll get this 3G, 4G cellular failover page. It actually has a table of supported modems, providers, and whether they're supported on the MX or the MX and the Z1 teleworker appliance. Let's see here. Are there any issues with, okay, so this question is for Brandon.
Okay.
Brandon, in terms of the licensing model, the subscription model, have you had any issues with management or finance or anybody around the license cost of the devices? Were there any concerns raised about that license cost or that recurring subscription model?
Nowhere near as much as I've had with SmartNet. There have been some questions about it, but nothing of great significance, whereas, with SmartNet, we have a thing with SmartNet where we buy X amount of time, but we're paying on it yearly. Whereas with the Meraki, it's just like, okay, here's your device, here's your license, you pay this, and you go on your way. So I think the most question I've had is just, okay, well, you're buying this equipment, what's this license for? And I have to explain to our people in finance, this is what this license is, this is what entitles me to. We got the license for this amount of time because this is what we expect to be the useful life of this equipment. So short answer, not really.
Makes sense. So one thing that I want to mention there, because one kind of concern that we get from various people, partners, customers, et cetera, is they're concerned potentially about that subscription model. And I think what Brandon just highlighted is actually an important note, which is there are two ways to approach the licensing. Most people hear subscription or they hear license model and they think, oh, I have to re-up every year or every couple years. You can do it that way. But the majority of our customers actually buy a 3 or 5 year license, and you can actually get a 7 or even a 10-year license if you want to. And what I always encourage people to do who are like, well, I don't want to have to worry about re-upping this every year. I don't want to have to go through finance every year to deal with this, et cetera, or worry about like, oh, we missed the deadline and then what happens. You can get a 3, 5, 7-year license up front. It's actually cheaper per year the longer term you get, as most licensing models tend to be. And then you just say, okay, 7 years is the lifetime. That's how long I'm going to use this device. At that point, I'm going to replace it with something newer. So I'll just get a 7-year license. It'll be cheaper than getting 7 1-year licenses, and then that's it. I never have to worry about licensing again for that model because I'm going to go ahead and refresh that because hopefully I'm not going to have a single piece of technology in my architecture, right, my networking architecture for more than 7 or 10 years. So that's one way you can kind of handle that. Let's see here. Dave wants to know, does the security appliance have any compatibility with Amazon VPC? So we do actually, we just announced and just released, and if you may have noticed, if you were looking very carefully, when I plug into Dashboard, there was actually a quick banner about that, but our website also has a banner on it. We actually just released a virtual MX security appliance for Amazon Web Services that you can run in VPC. It is not for securing your cloud environment. It's for extending your that Auto VPN, IPsec VPN, and our Meraki SD-WAN capability to AWS. So if you have resources that might traditionally have lived in a data center that now live in AWS, or you have services running in AWS, and you want to connect your sites to those using Meraki Auto VPN, Meraki SD-WAN, you can now do that by leveraging this virtual MX that lives in Amazon. And you can learn more about that by going to meraki.cisco.com and clicking on this Learn More. Jay wants to know about alerting. So how does the alerting work? Can you configure API calls or something to connect to an RMM tool to generate support tickets? So yes, first of all, there is built-in alerting through email as well as through SNMP traps. You can also use our dashboard API to send kind of push data to an RMM tool, an SIEM tool, or something else in order to generate events and generate tickets, alerts, whatever you want. That's all just depends on how you have that RMM set up, but you can export that data using our APIs. Let's see here. Sorry, still scrolling through questions. Great question from Paul. Does MC Communications work in Canada? For anyone who's listening from Canada, we actually recently launched MC in Canada. So yes, if you are in the US or Canada, MC is available today. We are working on other regions as well. All right, so I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then I'm going to wrap up because we are right at the end of our time. Okay, so Douglas wanted to know what the difference is between enterprise and advanced security license for the MX security appliance, which is a great question. I can actually show you if we go to the website, we go to the MX, a lot of the information that we actually try to keep as much information as we can on the website. So if you're curious about something, odds are good the answer can be found either at meraki.cisco.com or documentation.meraki.com. Of course, you can always reach out to your rep for a quick answer as well. But if we go to the models page and we scroll down, we're actually going to see enterprise and advanced security licensing. The enterprise license includes everything except what we call the advanced threat features. Advanced threat includes URL content filtering, safe search enforcement, IPS, malware protection, geo-firewalling, those sorts of features. Everything that is not in that list is included in the enterprise license. VPN, SD-WAN, basic layer 3 and 7 firewalling, link bonding, failover, all that good stuff, cellular, everything included in enterprise. If you have security, you get all the enterprise stuff plus those advanced threat features. And it's a one or the other. You'd purchase one or the other of the two. All right, I will take one more, well, I'm going to say two more questions because there's quite a few left and I'm trying to get through as many as I can. Here we go. How do we get access to that hosted logs beta feature? So reach out to your Cisco Meraki rep and tell them you want to try out the URL logging beta on the MX, and they will connect you to the right folks to make that happen. I believe you can also go through our support organization as well. You can create a support ticket, but I'm not positive whether support will refer you back to your rep. So your best bet is probably to start with your rep and go from there. All right, last question that I will take. Trying to find a real good one here. Brad wants to know, are there MV cameras that have environmental monitoring, like temperature and noise monitoring? So from a monitoring perspective, not really today. We have two models of MV. And again, I'll come to the website here because it's the easiest way to show what I'm talking about. There are two MV models, the MV21, which is the indoor, and the MV71, which is the outdoor unit. The only difference between them is the MV71 is IP66 and IK10 rated, right? It's in a hardened enclosure, and it also has a built-in heater. So it will actually, if you are in an area where the temperatures are low enough, right, that the camera would otherwise stop functioning, that heater will keep it at operating temperature. The MV21 doesn't have that because it's designed to be deployed indoors. All right, so with that, I am out of time. I apologize. I know there are quite a few questions I didn't have time to get to. There are a lot of you here on the WebEx, which is great, but it means I can't necessarily answer everything, and Deanna's typing frantically trying to get as many answers as she can. But please do reach out to your Cisco Meraki rep for any follow-up questions that you have or anything we didn't get to today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you especially to Brandon for taking the time to walk us through Bar S Foods and what they're doing with this technology. And I hope everyone has, thank you. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day, great rest of their week. And again, thanks for joining us today.